Hello, I'm Dr. Sarah Fulham-McQuillan, and I teach a range of subjects here at Sutherland School of Law, including medical law, constitutional law, and tort law. And tort law is the subject of today's mini lecture. You'll see from the title of today's lecture, A Missed Murder, a Dodgy Diagnosis, and a Simple Snail, that there's a whole range of everyday issues that are encompassed within tort law. We're going to touch on one or two of those real life cases that those issues refer to throughout the course of today's lecture. But to begin, a little word about why tort law is such a great subject to study. It's interesting and engaging, which makes it easy for you to engage with and to remember, because it's about us, it's about our families, our neighbours, our friends, and our everyday lives. Tort law is about regulating individuals' behaviour and how we interact with each other, and whether we have a duty to care for somebody else or to not be negligent in our actions towards them. As well as that, in taking the subject of tort law, you're joining thousands of law students around the world who have to take as a mandatory subject tort law in their first or second year of study. And it's the same here at Sutherland School of Law. You're also doing yourself a favour, because if you do go on to choose to qualify as a solicitor or a barrister, you will have to take another tort law exam, and so it's definitely worth paying attention the first time around. The word tort is probably something that you haven't really come across in your everyday lives, and there's actually no one particular definition of it. At its core, it means a civil wrong that occurs between individuals, and if an individual is found to have wronged somebody else, a sum of damages will be awarded to the individual who was wronged. So a civil wrong is something as opposed to criminal law. So criminal law is usually between the state and the individual, whereas we call tort law a private law subject because it's between two individuals. A sum of damages is essentially a sum of money that the court awards in recognition of the wrong being done. So tort law is a collection of rules made by judges in courts that regulates our behaviour. Common examples that you've probably heard of are medical negligence, product liability, trespass, and defamation actions. So if somebody says something that harms their reputation in the eyes of another person. So they're all examples of tort law claims. As you can see, they're between individuals, but tort law also regulates our professions. So medical negligence regulates the medical professionals. Tort law would also govern any claims that are brought against a solicitor or a barrister if someone thinks they've acted negligently, and also the police. A case that we're going to mention now that relates to the missed murder in the title of today's lecture concerns the UK Supreme Court from a few years ago. So Irish law actually borrows quite heavily from English law in a number of areas, including in tort law. So the UK Supreme Court decided a case. The question for them was whether the police force owed a duty of care to protect individuals during the investigation and prosecution of crime. The facts were that a young woman named Ms. Michael dialed 999, and she feared that she was in immediate danger of violence from her ex-partner. Unfortunately, through a series of errors, the police didn't understand the immediacy of this, and they didn't arrive at her home in time to save her from being killed by her ex-partner. So the question for the court was whether the police had a duty of care to protect Ms. Michael from that killing. The court had to weigh a number of different factors, and this is where tort law gets very interesting, because our intuitive reaction to those facts might be that the police, of course, would owe us a duty of care to protect us. But the court had to take into consideration the wider societal interest as well. And that included having public confidence in the police to do their jobs effectively, which wouldn't be the case if the police could be sued at every turn. And that weighed heavily in the court's determination. So they decided in that case in the UK that the police do not owe a duty of care to individual people in society when investigating and prosecuting crime. I think that case is a perfect example of demonstrating how what we believe to be a right answer in society may not always translate into law, because there are different considerations to be taken into account. The reason why a decision like that can be decided by the court by taking into account the wider societal interest is because any tort law decision that's made affects how we as individuals in society interact with each other. And it determines and sets out the boundaries of what our behaviours are and aren't within the law. So tort law has had a slightly higher resonance within kind of popular culture more recently, with Kim Kardashian West sharing on her Instagram stories about her upcoming tort law exam and sharing her study notes on standard of care and breach of duty, two foundational subjects or topics that we cover within tort law in the first couple of weeks. Legally Blonde also features tort law quite heavily, with Elle Woods being called out in tort law. And actually, coincidentally, the whole series began with the author of the original books sitting in tort law in a tort law class and realizing that she wanted to make a parody of law school. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope to welcome you in September 2020 or September 2021.